Welcome to the afternoon sections. I hope all of you enjoy the talks this afternoon. I do. I love the talks very much. I'm very pleased to be, your moderator this afternoon too. Today, we have a terrific panel on sustaining the development and applications of gerontech, where we will be talking about the theme we need to keep our eyes on. And that could directly impact to our business. Or maybe if you are in the social service, that will be impact on our social service. So here is the arrangement to give you a clue of what to anticipate this afternoon. I will start by asking questions. Of course, we would like to listen to you, listen to your voice, and include you in the conversations. Therefore, please ask questions, share your comments, and even challenge our thoughts in the Q&A box. And we will pick up later. We are lucky to have 3 experts this afternoon on Nordic experience. And I would like to grab this opportunity to ask the first questions. Just now, many people leave a lot of questions on co-creation. I know that all 3 speakers touch on co-creation. It is very good that we believe on, listening to the user's voice, and also we respect their opinion. But to us, there must be some challenge ideas or maybe strategies that we have to adopt when we look into co-create, co-design. Can all of you share a little bit more on this area with us? Do you have any challenge or barriers or hurdles that you have come across in the past? Maybe I should ask Hank first.
Yeah, thank you. Of course, I've already been saying something about co-creation with people with dementia and the challenge it is, and that we really need to find new ways to generally involve them in that whole process. So in particular also in the pre-design phase, where you actually come up with ideas and support. But I think one of the most challenges we have this year is, of course, during COVID-19. So how do we do co-creation at a distance? And actually, if I look at most of the AL projects and also the national projects, they have been still for months. So it was really difficult to do actual involvement of end users in our projects. It was really difficult to do evaluation. So all the design phases were difficult. However, this summer we started to think, well, we need to find new ways of doing that and involving them. So, for example, in one of the AL projects, we now developed an online co-creation methodology. It's a lot of work for the researchers and co-designers because you have to be really active. We do that in groups, sometimes with 4 or 5 people. But it now starts to work, and it's really nice to see that people also feel that they are involved, even online, by the methodology we are using now in some of the projects. So we need to, in this pandemic, we really need to focus on new ways of doing it, and I think we are getting there. So that's quite positive. Yeah.
Okay, Peter, I know that you must have something in your mind. Can you share with us, Peter?
Yes. As I said earlier, I mean, co-creation in AAL has been established really for a very long time, particularly if we talk about the involvement of end users. I think it was in 2013 we published what we called a white paper as guidelines to excite people to our projects and members of our projects to take this on, and explaining how we thought it could be actually achieved. So that was a guidance and an encouragement to do this. And then, as I said, it is now actually really mandatory, really, for AAL projects to do this. And it's quite interesting because I mentioned in my talk the impact assessment that we did, where we have had independent consultants looking at AAL projects, because it's very important not just to do the work, but actually try and assess the impact that it does have in the marketplace and in general. And I wrote down a quote that from their report here. It says proactive end user involvement throughout the life of the projects, from design to testing, has helped to bring solutions to market that address the needs of users. And I think that's really the point. I think one of the points that if we're going to have a sustainable gerontech, we have to make sure that the projects not just use technology, because technology is just an enabler. But the real thing is, do these projects really meet the needs and the desires of the people for whom they're being developed? And I think that having a systematic focus on co-creation, co-design is a way of doing it. And as I said earlier in answer to a question on my talk, it's not just actually in the projects themselves that we have to do it. We have to do it in our support. We're doing it in our support actions, in which individual projects work together sometimes, and in our networking activities we do it. So that, as I mentioned, we have older people in the forum, so these things are discussed. So I think we have to have discussion. We actually have to do it practically on the ground for individual projects, but we also have to have it as part of the way of thinking. So, and I think we probably will talk. Maybe we'll talk a little bit more in this panel about ecosystems. I think as ecosystems develop, we should make that an integral part of ecosystems. I mean, personally, I think there's one final aspect. I mentioned it just as my view about this, that we really have to look also, end users aren't just, I mean, at one end we have perhaps people like dementia sufferers who are very much on the receiving side of this, but we also have older people who are both receivers actually also and contributors. So if you involve end users and they are effectively doing very effective market research for you, so the idea that you just ask them questions and then they go away, I think is the wrong approach. I think we should be thinking about this as integral members of our design and development teams. And therefore, just as we pay designers, like I said, we should pay end users.
I see.
So it's a personal view of this.
I see. How about Ben?
Yeah, thank you, Grace. Yeah, from my perspective, we at the Nordic Council, we are the Nordic Welfare Center, and where we work in our projects, we don't work with innovation, new technologies, and innovation of new services. We sort of have these new technologies and services. They are done. The development is done. What we work with is as how they could be innovated, so to speak, in the services. And that's where I mentioned in my presentation that we have these 8 regions and 52 municipalities in our projects working, and they go so quickly directly on the technology, on the piloting, and they forget about insight and anchoring. And that in insight and anchoring, both in when it comes to organization, staff, but of course when it comes to the end users and not the least their relatives. So you need to have a model for that. You have to need a strategy for that. And that's why we find this roadmap for service innovation, that we underline that working with insight. Because before deciding which kind of technology you should do when you should use for doing this for this purpose, you have to involve the users, otherwise you won't succeed. We can see that you have to do it. So this is it's just the key to success, to work with co-creation and involving the ones that are going to use these services. Otherwise you will fail, I think.
Every one of you, when you just mentioned about co-creation, and now I have curiosity. I'm thinking about whether we should engage the government first, because just now you have given me a lot of example. For example, the guidelines, the what I call the blueprint, roadmap, and these are very structural things. Maybe they have government support, but on the other hand, we have the market-driven by the users' needs. They have a bottom-up approach to give you the insight. To me, I have curiosity. For example, on this area is for the coming decade. Do you think, this will shape the market? How the market can be shaped by the guidelines or by the co-creation? How about Ben?
Yes, of course. I think this we will see this change. I would see this due to the generations we have, and the generations that as Peter said, when what we think is new and old technology when it comes to age, we can see that people of the 60s and 70s right now will have other demands on what to give and what to have, and I want to do it from their own perspective, and we're sort of living in a more individualized world as well. So it's important that we have these forces from each and every person and the groups of persons, but we also need to work from the governmental and authorities to see how to manage the situation. So it's from both ways, I think. And in between, I think sometimes you can see that organizations and the welfare models are sort of squeezed between what's coming from upside and what's coming from bottom up. And they have to handle this situation. And that goes back to what I was talking about, change management and leadership in sort of these organizations to manage this situation. It happens so much when it comes to mainstreaming right now. We can see that a lot of the apps and the mobile phones and what we use in mainstream could in fact replace some of the services that we have sort of developed in the organizations. And how do we handle that in a very good way? That's a big question from now and in the future, I think. And we are working, seeing how, for example, wearables is one of these things that is increasing a lot. How can we use wearables and the mainstream product wearables and all the data that's collected in wearables? We can see that the wearables, some of these wearables that we have, they replace like this night watch thing we saw, or GPS watches as well. Hannah, how do we handle that in a way?
I see. Han and Peter, do you agree with Ben, or you want to add some more in this area?
Yeah, I totally agree with Ben, and it is certainly both ways. So in many of the projects we are doing, we always try to involve the relevant stakeholders. So, for example, whenever a stakeholder is the municipality or government, they are included also even from co-creation and co-design. And I think that stakeholder analysis in the beginning of implementation and upscaling of e-health is very important. So you need to know who are the payers, who are the buyers, who are the users, who have the legal frameworks, etc. So yes, it goes from top to down and also from bottom to up. And we do that the same actually in care organizations. So it's also always important to have the directors involved, but also the people in the floor who are working there and the clients. And the same holds, of course, with governments. Yeah.
Okay. We have a very hot discussions, and I have collected a lot of questions already. So maybe I would like to address to Peter these questions. Just now we have so many projects, they are age-specific. What are your thoughts on the viabilities on the birth cohort independent universal design?
Sorry, I didn't hear that. What's my view on
the birth cohort independent universal design? The universal design.
I'm sorry, I can't hear you clearly. Sorry.
Yeah, your thought of the viabilities of these age-specific projects to the universal design.
Of the project, the kind of project, the viability of the kind of projects that we're developing. Well, I think we're going through a process at the moment, and I think it's not so dissimilar from a lot of other big technological developments, and this is a big area because we are in a big demographic change. There is a big process going on, and we happen to be actually in one part in the process. And what you see in, I think, if you look at other big technological developments, you see all kinds of things happen, and all the kind of things that we're doing now. Some are successful in their own right, some add to the fund of knowledge, and some add to will actually just fail. But this is a process, and we will see. And usually, big social and technological developments go through, there's a classic so-called S-curve they go through. So you go through a period where a lot of activity takes place, and then you see the increase in viability. And when the thing starts to really take off, then a lot of players come in, and you get more successful projects. And I think we are probably, we are at a point where the market is beginning to take off. Various markets we're beginning to see markets emerging, as you mentioned in an introduction to you, in smart cities, in age-friendly environments, as well as in health and care. So we're seeing markets beginning to emerge. And I think we will see that because this is a very complicated area. I mean, it has many dimensions. It has a social dimension, it has health dimensions, economic, financial, technological, political, and geographic dimensions. And that means if I go back to your question about involving public authorities, of course we have to involve public authorities, and at different levels too, because they have to be involved at the local and regional areas where probably health and care is mostly implemented. Policies are very often discussed at national levels. And the long-term big companies, when they're involved in these areas, really would like to have global markets. So it has many, many dimensions. And I think we're at that process where all this is beginning to happen. We're all just little bit players in all this. But it's quite interesting to sit in AEL because we see we're operating at multiple levels. We're operating at the local and regional level, we're operating at a project level, we're operating at a European level because we get European funding, we have European networks and European structures. And I think we have to actually broaden these networks. You bring about, and I think Henk was saying, we very much welcome contacts with, this is a global problem. So I think we actually have to cooperate globally in this area.
Right. Yes, it's quite often that when we talk about the development of gerontech, definitely we also mentions age-friendly community or building up an age-friendly society or age-friendly products. It is all very well to say that all gerontech development should be user-driven, but we all understand that disadvantaged groups in society sometimes find it quite hard to access to the channel that can reflect their true needs. What can we NGOs do to empower the disadvantaged group that their needs could be articulated fully and accurately? I think every one of you need to answer these questions because I think in the Nordic experience that you have given us to this afternoon, it seems that you have some protocol to get the things done. I really want to know, how can you help us NGOs to do this empowerment? How about Ben?
Yeah, I think we have to see it as it's a natural way of our model to cooperate with NGOs on all levels, on local level, on regional level, on national level, and also Nordic level. And we try to have different platforms and network for doing this. But I think it's most important is down to where it happens on local and regional level to do it. Otherwise, it's just being nice and friendly discussions and words, but we have to go down to making it work, and you have to have models for doing that on the way, and that differs. I can't really say that I can answer how it works, but I know that the one that are successful are working with NGOs, and because they see what, again, if you do that, you will be successful doing it. And some of them work with strategic models for doing this. There are so-called living labs where you go in and test different kind of services when the NGOs and also the organizations for retired persons are invited to participate and to get their feedback in the different parts of the development. So yeah, we're trying, but I think there's a lot to do in that area. It's a lot to do in that area because there are so much to gain of using that forces into this development.
I agree. There's a lot to do in this area. Hank,
Yeah.
your projects is got so many partners. Are they also having the same missions to do the empowerment to the disadvantaged group?
That is, of course, a very interesting and good question. And it also really is related to responsible innovation, I think. So, of course, people within projects have different roles and organizations have different roles. Companies, they want to make business, and that's a different role than, for example, a care organization who wants client happiness. And we as care knowledge institutes, we really want to share knowledge and learn from others. So, of course, those roles are always different in projects. But what we are doing right now, and I showed the example of Guardian, is that we also take responsible innovation as an integral part of the project. So we're constantly focusing on those aspects of being responsible in the process of developing innovation, but also to think about what product will we develop and what will be the impact of that product whenever we are not co-creating and developing it anymore. So when we have it in the market. So I think, of course, the roles will always be different, but at least if we understand each other's roles and be responsible about what we do, I think that's very important in these innovation projects.
Okay. How about Peter?
Yeah, I mean, if I broaden it slightly, we agree entirely. I agree entirely with what he says in terms of responsible innovation. I mean, issues of ethics in this whole process are really very important. I mean, obviously, everybody has to comply with laws on things like privacy and so forth, but we also are very concerned to see developments in actually the way people do things, or the way they do responsible innovation. And we are developing within AAL some guidelines and a sort of code of ethics where we actually go much further into sort of what one might call the soft law kind of areas, where we expect people to behave ethically, and we will really behave what we're going to describe as ethical excellence. So we would like our project to do that, and we're looking at processes whereby actually at all stages of the development of projects with all the key people, with the key kinds of stakeholders, that there are the right kind of dialogues that enable you to be able to say that you are actually doing this in an ethically excellent way. Because it's obviously, in a sense, a good thing per se to be ethically excellent, but actually one of the things that determines, I think, the development of the market is trust. And if you can show that you are ethically excellent, that increases trust, and trust increases confidence in the buyers, and that, I think, will do well for the development of the market.
I think just now you mentioned, that part. I just think of one word is about ecosystem. This is all part of the ecosystem. Okay. This question is also for three of you. Not a long questions, but a big questions. What are, in your opinion, the topic in Gerontech most urgent to address? Wow, this is big. How about Ben?
Yeah, I think we have a lot of very good Gerontech that we could use. We've got a lot of services, a lot of technologies that are well developed. We know that they for out of user perspective and also relatives, they are very welcome and are asked for. But we have still difficulties to scale up and to offer these services to all the ones that needs them. I also think that Henk did from Henk's presentation when you showed us the solution you had there for people with dementia, and you said that it's very good for the 10% of the population that had this dementia. Then those 10%, they should really have this solution. For the other 90%, we have to find other strategies and solutions. So again, back to how do we really fit this in that is the very best for each and every person. And how do we do that? And what strategy do we? And I think that we have lots and lots to do there when it comes to gerontology, how to make it work for each and every person. Because there are a lot of services that could work for each and every person, but how do we do it? How does it fit in for each and every person? That's a huge challenge, and we have to work again and again and again with this.
Okay. Now come to Peter.
Well, I think you mentioned ecosystems. I think the development, really moving forward on ecosystems, is absolutely critical to the development of Gerontech and to active and healthy aging. I mean, what we're really the big target we have, if we look at it, is to actually change from the situation where we have a lot going on to where this really becomes ubiquitous in socio-economic, in society, and as an economic force, and it's really making a significant difference to the lives of older people all over the place. And that does require, I think, the building on the kind of ecosystems that exist and really bring all stakeholders together into various forms of these ecosystems. So we need the right kind of financial people involved. We need the right kind of government and public authorities involved. And we need all kinds of business, and probably businesses that currently don't participate. I mean, sometimes the issues between smart cities and living in homes and so forth, we've got to get across all these barriers. And we have to, as I say, operate at multiple levels. And I think if we do that, we will start to see new kinds of business models emerging, which enable this kind of these systems to develop more quickly. We have some quite difficult systems, I think, if you look at society as a whole, where one wants to put something in that would benefit older people, but it costs money, but actually it results in saving somewhere else in society. But because of the structures of society, it's quite difficult to actually organize that there's a connection between the point where the cost is and where the benefit is. And so those kind of things we need to deal with as well. So it's a complicated socioeconomic problem, as well as, and as I said before, technology and the systems we're developing the products and services we develop are enablers to this broader development, I think.
Okay. How about Henk?
Yeah, I fully agree, of course, with Bent and also with Peter. And I think what we should focus on in the future is really on the personalization. So personalized support and interventions. And of course, we can use AI and data on that. We gather so much data, so we can actually use that also for predictions, for health predictions, to support them in a personalized way. So I see a future for that. Of course, the inclusion, we already discussed, the supporting the client journey. Of course, everybody goes through a journey in their lives and try to support them in those different phases with personalized technologies. And in the Netherlands, I mean, our government is really asking for cost-effective e-health. So we also need to focus more on that. So what is the actual impact of the things that we are developing, and is it cost-effective? So I think those are some routes for Gerontech in the future.
Okay. Wow, excellent, panelists. We are getting close to the end of our time together, but definitely to me, I have learned a lot, and I'm so sure that our audience also have the same feeling. Thank you so much for such an enlightening discussions this afternoon. Thanks, Peter. Thanks, Ben. Thanks, Hank, again.